the Opium War. They have not forgotten what happened around Hong Kong. They have not forgotten how they thought they had to kowtow to the British Empire. Ma'am, you've been doing a lot of research. Talk to me first about the string of meetings that she's had with these foreign leaders over the last couple of weeks.
Well, look, I think we're in an era of global fealty to China, and you're seeing that on full display right now. And I think the past that you're discussing, which is certainly informing the present, certainly scary. But I think what's even more concerning is really the Chinese Communist Party's conception of the future. You know, you heard it from Mark Carney himself, right? This concept of the new world order, that's something we've been talking about for a while, whereby China is the new sort of global hegemon, replacing the United States. And I think that when you see what's going on, particularly with the Central Military Commission and the escalation of things in Taiwan, I think it's fair to say that's going to become the sort of kinetic flashpoint for all of the diplomatic meetings that you're seeing going on. I think they're at their sixth high-level, government president-to-president meeting already for 2026, like Captain Fennell said, with the Uruguayan leader there right now. But I think what's so important to understand about the changes on the CMC, which of course follows, significant overhaul. Basically, everybody is gone now. The second in command, not just on the CMC, but to Xi Jinping being ousted. I think there's sort of this common misconception that it's the older generals who are really hostile and want to move on Taiwan, when in reality, it's the younger ones, particularly those that we've seen be appointed to be commanders sort of in the Eastern Theater, obviously more relevant to Taiwan. But those are the people who, not just because they have this sort of fealty and almost this weird, in the most traditional sense, political correctness, where they don't want to madden Xi Jinping, they don't feel like they can stand up to him. Whereas the, old guard is a little more hesitant. You even saw that with, the second in command who was just relieved or is being investigated now. He was sort of more on the 2035 timeline for potentially being ready for a Taiwan invasion, as opposed to the more aggressive 2027 version. I also think it's worth noting, too, that the individual who was just ousted, he was sort of the point person, at least for a while under Joe Biden, having sort of, back channel discussions, at least military to military comms, related to Taiwan, related to a host of issues. And I think that dynamic is going to be very interesting to watch in the shakeup, because essentially what you're going to see is that everybody over there, no one is going to want to converse with the United States, converse with Taiwan, converse with the West, right? Because the guy who was basically the point person on doing that was ousted, not necessarily for doing that, but I think it sets a really concerning cascade effect. I also would point to, I think what you saw go on in Venezuela, obviously the reporting talking about how, the Chinese air defense systems there failed. That's pretty damning for the Chinese. Obviously, they're going to recalibrate after that. So I think that's why you've seen such a significant overhaul too. And I think the most important thing to understand the internal dynamics there is that the only thing that Xi Jinping fears is really a military coup, which I think you could see happen if a Taiwan invasion were to actually occur, but more importantly, to drag on and sort of a Russia-style invasion. So I think those are the relevant dynamics at play. But I also think something that the audience really needs to stay ahead of the curve on. Of course, Western media is not going to cover it. They actually think that everything that's going on at the CMC is good for Taiwan. I would say Taiwan should be nervous. But that is what's going on with the KMT in the Chinese Communist Party, the KMT being the opposition to the DPP, which favors a much stronger defense, not just subsidized by America, but by Taiwan itself, against the Chinese Communist Party. They're pushing a special defense budget right now, around 40 billion US dollars, that the KMT, which are basically, let's just call them what they are, the CCP over in Taiwan, are desperately trying to kill. And really an affront to the Taiwanese people. They are, I think it's concluding shortly, but making really a concerning 3-day delegation trip visit to the mainland, to Beijing, meeting with high-level Chinese Communist Party officials, particularly on the Taiwan desk, visiting Tsinghua University, doing, the whole pomp and circumstance, the whole tour over there, with the vice chairman of the party and about 40 scholars from the think tank that is affiliated with the party there. This, of course, being a precursor to having the actual chairman of the party go over there, though, of course, the KMT had to do a lot of favors to the Chinese Communist Party to even get this meeting in the first place. But this, I think, is really concerning. Obviously, we focus on the sort of hybrid warfare, the gray zone stuff, the political infiltration. But this is pretty in your face, right? Obviously, the KMT is pretty hollowed out by the Chinese Communist Party. But the kowtowing and the groveling, particularly over this special defense budget, obviously the Trump administration, allotted billions of dollars to Taiwan, but Taiwan themselves are focusing on, particularly through the legislative yuan, trying to get the $40 billion passed. The KMT, so that's the CCP, proxy party, has 52 seats. The DPP has 51, and then the TPP has about 8 seats. So that's where you have more wiggle room with that party. But what you're seeing really is the Chinese Communist Party, by all means necessary, trying to sabotage this special defense budget because it's so instrumental to Taiwan's defense, but also that you've seen signaling from the United States and President Trump that they support it too. So I think all of these things together show you that Xi Jinping is extremely emboldened. And anybody who's saying otherwise, that's just nonsense talk. I've been hearing China is going to collapse for decades now, before I was ever born. That's not quite true. And rhetoric like that, I think, is pretty dangerous.